Right. Hello, everybody. I'm Krish Patel from the Caron Research Institute here at the iwCAR-T meeting with my colleagues. Tell us about yourselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Graff from Michigan Cancer and Blood in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm a lymphoma specialist, and I lead the clinical trials program at Michigan Cancer and Blood.
And I'm Caron Jacobson. I am a lymphoma doctor at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston and also run our cell therapy program.
So we just had this really exciting session talking about how to improve delivery of immune effector cell therapies like CAR-T cells and bispecific antibodies in the community. So Dr. Graff, can you kind of summarize what have you learned through your efforts in your organization and share with us kind of what do you think is the roadmap for?
That's a great question. So, every site is a little bit different. So 3 years ago, a little bit over now when I think about it, we were offered one of the first bispecific trials, and I was very excited to be able to do that, but we hadn't really had a cellular therapy program in place. We hadn't done transplant, we had never done CAR-T, and so it wasn't a matter of not being able to do it, it was just putting the pieces together to be able to build, number one, a safe program, right? Because safety first when it comes to these therapies. And so I think the important thing is really figuring out, your strengths and your weaknesses and what weaknesses can be overcome. Strengths are strengths, they're not going anywhere, but there are some weaknesses, and I shouldn't even use the word weaknesses. There are some logistical barriers that can be overcome and fixed and rectified, and there are other things that there really isn't a workaround, and that would sort of be a no-go. But for us, we really had all the pieces in place. And so it was really, figuring out a strong team, figuring out the logistical barriers, making sure there was a relationship with the hospital staff, who was going to monitor these patients and manage, calls in the middle of the night should they come in, what were we going to do if they had issues or side effects such as cytokine release syndrome or neurotoxicity. And so that was something that was really, important for me to figure out and have a plan before we started our first patient.
Yeah, I think a lot of different considerations there. And I think as was raised in the discussion, partnerships between sites that have had a lot of experience and those that are just getting started is a really important way to kind of improve access. So Dr. Jacobson, you were telling us a little bit about your experience in doing that and tell us what you think is critical to share.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that, Dr. Graff's experience with the first bispecific trial was not dissimilar from my experience in 2013 when we had our first CAR-T cell trial open at Dana-Farber. We had no idea what we were doing. We had to do all the same things. And I think as long as you have the tools in place to be able to address all of the needs, then I think you are a site that can do this. And it doesn't have to be an academic center in a large city. It can absolutely be a community center, but I think really, really crucially, you have to have a hospital partner that not only where the patients can go, but where the ICU physicians or the medicine subspecialty consultants or the emergency room is willing and able and interested in partnering with you to take care of these patients. Even in Boston, where it's very concentrated in terms of the number of centers that can administer these therapies, we still serve a very extended radius where we get people in, basically at the Canadian border in Maine, and that road, the time it takes for those patients to get to us is not something that they're willing to do, weekly or even bi-weekly for 4 or 5 weeks. And so it's really important for us to find sites like Tara's that that are a little bit further afield, where once I hear about those patients, I can refer them to those centers and patients can have more ease and more access. So this is only a good thing. I think finding sites like that, it's not going to get I always say it's not going to get CAR-T or bispecifics in everyone's backyard, but it's going to bring it closer to people and increase the number of people who do have it in their backyard.
Yeah, I think great points. There's really this learning curve that there is for all of us, right? Mm-hmm. And so being able to find that layer of support that you really need to be able to safely deliver those therapies is critical. One of the questions that came up in the panel was really this idea that perhaps more uptake is going to be driven by this broader proliferation of these technologies and therapies in diseases outside of heme. Are you starting to see more of that? Do you see that as really maybe the extra push to get more sites to be able to safely deliver these therapies?
Personally, I think that we've been hearing so much recently about, CAR-T and bispecifics and autoimmune diseases, and the academic centers are doing such a heavy lift already with all their own patients. First of all, you have your own patients, and then you're being, sometimes asked to just do the step-up dosing, but in a lot of cases, just being sent those myeloma, depending on, the disease state, sent those patients, and they don't come back to the community site because they're happy once they've been sent. So that's going to increase the burden. I mean, there aren't endless resources at the academic level either. And so I think community sites need to help. Again, does that mean every community site across the country? No. I think, again, it's important to identify those sites that have been doing bispecifics. And I don't just mean one or two. I mean, have, very good programs, flourishing programs that have proven, their safety record, their efficacy record, and their efficiency record, I should say, even more importantly, too. But we need to be able to help because CAR-T isn't going anywhere. Bispecifics are not going anywhere. They're just going to get moved up. And so just within the oncology state, we need to be able to help. And now you factor in the autoimmune arm of all of this. We need to work together and I think really bridge that gap to co-manage these patients when we can.
Yeah, I mean, certainly so many different populations now. We're seeing more bispecifics in solid tumor as well. Really large populations of patients where I think, that access piece becomes even more critical. So I just want to say thank you to our panelists today and thanks to everybody for joining us at iwCAR-T.